Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. Critical look at Canada's role abroad. I'm Eve Engler, coming to you from Tiohtià:ke, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And we're going to be doing the half an hour again because they have the campaign meeting taking place just after. A decent number of developments this week. Uh, First thing is the report from the World Meteorological Organization, I believe, that the CO2 in the atmosphere, highest level ever in 2024. Further confirmation of the situation with the climate crisis, spiraling increasingly out of control, and Canada continues to be a large emitter. And Mark Carney has jettisoned his plans. Now they're downgrading or the 2030 targets to reduce Canadian greenhouse gas emissions. The Ecuadorian government revoked the environmental license of DP Metals, which is a Toronto firm, uh, because of local opposition, which is, I think, a good move. But the Canadian mining companies, of course, are involved in conflicts with communities all around the world, and there are so many examples. Some of them get into the corporate media, and many, of course, don't. On the front of the National Post, I think it was on Thursday, John Ivison had a piece headlined "Iranian Regime on the Ropes. Canada can help knock it out." And I just like, I mean, the piece itself is probably ignorant in that I don't actually believe that his assessment of the Iranian regime being weak is or as weak as Iverson's claiming is correct. But the notion that this is just like what we can do, what we do, like we have the right, right? It's oh, they have a weak government, it's our opportunity to knock it out. That the depth of the open imperialist kind of thinking is just kind of startling. And of course, we know that they've demonized the Iranian government, and there's a backstory to it. But why is it Canada's right to quote unquote knock any regime out, any government out, any so? But this is a very deeply held philosophy, quite honestly, across the political spectrum. And on that note, what's been going on with Venezuela, with Trump just endlessly bombing? I think it's now seven different vessels that have been attacked. They apparently killed some Colombians. There's a big dispute now with when the Colombians criticize the fact that they killed Colombians. Now they've really turned on Gustavo Petro, and they're claiming he's a drug runner, and they're claiming he's a this and that. The Americans have cut off more of its aid projects in Colombia, so they're starting to turn the screws on the Colombian government as well, as they seem to be setting clearly they're trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. I mean, they've been trying for that, on and off in different degrees for 20 years, but this is, or more than 20 years, this is a real escalation. And this is the intended aim of this campaign is to oust the Venezuelan government. Whether they're going to go as far as they would probably need to go to do that, we'll see. I hope not, of course. And I don't know enough about, internal Venezuelan politics to know how strong Maduro is. My sense is he is pretty strong. And the Wall Street Journal had a story that I didn't read, but I saw online. I don't have an online subscription, about basically complaining that they've had many years to be coup-proofed by developing close relations with the military, and having the government having proper control over the military, and sort of bemoaning that it's not so easy to overthrow the government because traditionally find a faction of the military willing to do your dirty work, and that's how you oust the government. Uh, and Now the thing about the Venezuela, so I haven't seen any Canadian criticism. We discussed this a few weeks. Canada's got different ways in which they're assisting the Americans here. I'm pretty confident it's more than we know. Canadian naval vessels in the region, NORAD. Now, Canada led a 2-year campaign, overt, probably one of the most unique forms of coup mongering in Canadian history, the campaign to oust Maduro in 2019 with Juan Guaido. That was a kind of a unique, heavily, Canada was right at the center of it. And then NDP effectively backed it. Hélène Lavadière was some division. It was sort of a degree. Hélène Lavadière, the foreign affairs critic, said they recognized Guaido, and then there was some degree of kind of pulling back on that. But effectively, they recognized Juan Guaido, and that kind of got lessened with time. And but in the weeks after, days and weeks after January 2019, the NDP supported that. Now, what I find fascinating in this NDP leadership race is that no one, even though the Canadian government's staying silent on this, no one comes out and criticizes this. This is now, it's on the front page of New York Times. It's been a top item on CBC The National. And the sense of like, oh, well, maybe, specifically Avi Lewis, maybe we should be criticizing Canada's complicity in this effort at war or regime change or whatever you want to call it in Venezuela. There's just no sense of responsibility for that. And it just speaks to the state of Canadian foreign policy discussion, where it's just, we let them do what they want to do, basically, internationally. And this is not, Canada's not playing a central role as they did in 2019. I don't want to in any way claim differently. But nonetheless, Canada's got a lot of responsibility here, current actions, but also the whole backstory. And the NDP has some complicity in that. And yet there's very little political demand, to disassociate from this pretty egregious violation of international law. Shifting gears, the front of Saturday's Globe was the whole full front page was a fine line. Mark Carney wants to repair Canada's relationship with China. Can he do so without angering the US? So basically, are we allowed to change our policy towards China? That's essentially what the Globe is saying it pretty openly. And it's all about like business. It's nothing about sort of the moral question of joining a U.S. campaign to isolate China. It's about whether this is good for Canadian business, and ostensibly there's this question about should we focus on human rights or should we focus on business interests? As if all of our target China is just all about human rights, not using human rights as a pretext for something else. But in the article, they do have an interesting, it's long, big, long, 2-page spread in the middle of the paper, and in it they have not much. Just recapping. It's nothing particularly interesting in the story, except for this one thing. Angus Reid did a poll recently, said 27% of Canadians now hold a favorable view of China, up from 16% earlier in 2025. So it's gone from 16 to 27%. I guess in the last 6 or 7 months, and nearly 3 times the number recorded in 2021. So there's a real shift, and I've seen other things. There was a global poll on this, real shift in attitude towards China, which apparently has something to do with obviously Donald Trump and dislike of the U.S. Now, where this all goes with the China question and the canola and the EVs and this and that, I don't know. I broadly support this, rapprochement with China. I don't know that it's this whole dynamic. You have this division between the interests of empire and the interests of capital, and the interests of capital are closer relations with China, and the interests of empire are isolating China. And in this case, capital is a preferred option, but it's not necessarily a great option. But that's the kind of dynamic on the China file. On the Ukraine, so the Maple has a story. Canada's embassy in Kyiv hosted a meeting with personnel affiliated with the Azov Brigade this summer. So the Azov Brigade, a colonel, I believe it was, got in touch with the Canadian embassy, and they had a meeting. Even though the Canadian embassy had said they're not doing this, the Azov, of course, is a right, far right brigade within political faction within the Ukrainian military. And it's a good article. It's worth reading. The Maple story. It kind of rehashes Canada's ties to the right, the far right in Ukraine. There's another story in the Globe about Canadian fighter jet landed on an Estonian highway for the first time. So I guess this Canadian fighter jet, there's this big exercise they're doing in Estonia, the NATO exercise, Tarasi 2025, Tarasis 2025, maybe how you pronounce it. And there's a CF-18 and other Canadian military that are, I guess, practicing in case you'd have to actually land on a highway during some sort of war scenario. Um, Obviously, this is just the ratchets up tensions. This is right on Russia's border. Canada, of course, has troops in Latvia and NATO exercises in Eastern Europe. They just seem to be doing more and more of these. Um, we'll see where this all goes. Obviously, what we're seeing coming at Ukraine is steady, slow Russian victory. And it's just the situation seems to be getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians. And I don't know where the out is here. Uh, Apparently, Trump was saying that to Zelensky on I think maybe that was Friday, and we'll see. They're trying to get the Tomahawk missiles from the U.S., which go as far as 2,500 kilometers, which would be a big escalation because they could potentially fire them much deeper into Russia. But the war just grinds on in its horrible way. On Palestine, the old maxim of the from the Palestinian perspective, we cease and Israel fires. That's what a ceasefire means. It seems to be holding true again. The Israelis, I don't know exactly how many they killed, but probably about 100 or so since the ceasefire, including blowing up a vehicle with a whole number of children in it, and then killing 50 or so, I think it was in the last 24 hours after the Israeli uh, armored vehicle, ran over a bomb that Israel had dropped and exploded, and two Israeli soldiers were killed. And so then they blamed the Palestinians, and they killed 50 or so Palestinian civilians. I mean, it's just the sickness of it. And the Israelis knew this right away, and the Americans apparently put some pressure. I just listened to Trump blaming Hamas for violence and this and that. So it's looking like Israel's going to go back to the mass killing or even greater mass killing because it's still ongoing, some degree of mass killing. I mean, I don't know what the exact number is, but it's less than it's been over recent months. So, but it's just it's positive, and there's some food getting in and stuff like that. But just the sickness of it all is just absolutely stunning. And unfortunately, looks like there's a decent chance that this is going to return back to the even greater levels of killing that we previously saw. On the Canadian angle on all this, obviously there's always lots to say on it. A few things this week. The the Maple published the update. David Dimitriche did an update on his Canadians fighting in the Israeli military. It's now up to 206 people he has listed out with all their details, and 49 confirmed to have been fighting in Gaza over the past 2 years. So that's a good number that should begin investigation. I mean, the RCMP should begin that investigation right away. and they should be prosecuted. I, very few that have been fighting in Gaza would not have been involved in some form of war crime. Um, so that's a good addition and should be praised. The other thing this week that's a big breakthrough, and it really is a big breakthrough. I mean, in the big scheme of things, it's not, but in the in the sort of medium scheme of things, it's quite a big breakthrough. Is the Fifth Estate did a 42-minute look at Canadian registered charities assisting in the occupation of West Bank and in assisting the Israeli military. And it's pretty good for the Fifth Estate, for CBC. It's pretty good. I mean, it's not. It ultimately just sort of scratches the surface of this absolutely scandalous issue, but it is a major contribution, and it's this is, in my opinion, the most important Canadian contribution to Palestinian dispossession, the registered charities. And there's a lot there. Uh, it's about 400 million a year. That's the assessment that Karen Rodman and Miles Howe, who've done the most important research on this, assess. It's hard to know the exact number. I have to say, on this issue, I went back and I looked at what I wrote in my Canada and Israel book in 2010, and a lot of it actually is quite embarrassing to see what I wrote. I wrote a fair bit about the charities, but I really didn't understand the issue at all, and I completely underplayed the scope of the subsidy, right? I talked about 25%. In fact, there's evidence it can be up to 90% of donations for rich people are covered by all taxpayers, and the illegality of it all, right? And even that, like I didn't know until I don't know when it was, but like 5 years ago that sending registered charities assisting a foreign military was contrary to CRA rules. I didn't know until it's like 6 months ago or 8 months ago with Karen. I think it's her that came across it. She's the one who told it to me, at least. It's illegal to assist municipalities elsewhere. This has nothing to do with Israel. This is just a blanket rule. The Canadian government doesn't subsidize charities that support a municipality in Haiti, a municipality in Mexico, whatever, right? And a whole bunch of them, we know a whole bunch of them support Israeli municipalities. We know, and I talk about this in the Canada Israel book. This one I do get into in more detail around West Bank settlements, because there was some legal opinions back in the early 90s or mid 90s that made it the CRA revoke charitable status around supporting West Bank settlements. And it's also contrary to CRA rules to support explicitly racist organizations. So I'm hesitant, and so when I say the 400 million a year number, and I think that like every time I've always been on the underestimate. So now I'm hesitant to go with this 400 million. I think it may be higher than that. And that 400 million doesn't even count all the Israel focused registered charities here. That's just money to Israel, right? So Honest Reporting Canada, which is a registered charity, that doesn't count in that. The federations, only the federations money to Israel counts. But they operate, they finance CJA, they finance, right? So B'nai B'rith, it's a registered charity, its operations. So there's probably $1 billion a year or raised by Jewish charities. Not all of them support Israel, but the most of them do. And it's obviously in varying degrees of each one is how much they support Israel. Anyway, so this issue is a huge, huge issue. And so and part of the reason why I'll make this point, that part of the reason why I consider the most important Canadian contribution to Palestinian dispossession is the uniqueness of it all. It's not like okay, Canada sends weapons, sells weapons to Israel, but that's a sale, and obviously it's immoral. Obviously it should stop. But at the end of the day, at least it's a sale. Israel is actually sending money, to a Canadian company. Now, a big chunk of the Canadian weapons actually go through the US, and a lot of those aren't sales. That would be the Pentagon buying from General Dynamics, Canada, and then giving it to Israel. But at least the Canadian company is being paid, right? It's not the Canadian taxpayer that's subsidizing that. But this is like a totally unique thing, right? Israel has a GDP per capita equal to Canada's. And so this is just this you're not sending all kinds of money to Japan or Sweden or whatever, right? So it's a totally unique and it goes back more than a century, right? And it was very important. The capital, now it wasn't subsidized by the Canadian taxpayer in the same way 100 years ago, but that capital in terms of Canadian supporting the Jewish National Fund, like early 1900s, 1910, JNF Canada established. That was actually quite important for the Zionist movement. And but since 67, and 67 is when Canada brought in the subsidies for registered charities, the tax credits. Since then, I think it's possible if you take the $400 million a year in today's money that's going, that would be 20 billion plus that's been sent to Israel, subsidized by Canadian taxpayers. Now, the amount subsidized is really hard to know, but it's possible that's half, could even be more than half, probably in the kind of range of half of that. So $10 billion by Canadian taxpayers to Israel. That's a significant amount of money. Um, and and again, it's just a totally unique thing. So the fifth estate putting some eyes on this is important. Also because there's about two dozen outstanding complaints, formal complaints to the CRA about Israel either subsidizing charities or groups like Honest Reporting Canada, Israel focused charities here around their charitable status. So this fifth estate report will definitely increase the pressure on the CRA to look at the question and take the question more seriously. So I think it's really opened up space. Now, for me, on a personal level, it is also rewarding because I mean I've written like dozens and dozens of stories about this issue, and so to see this mainstreamed is obviously a nice thing. And again, Karen Rodman has really been the anchor in this issue in the last few years. She has coordinated so much of the research, the action alerts, and that's of course Karen from Just Peace Advocates. The final thing I'll just talk very briefly about. Well, one positive thing. I posted a video of a disruption. I wasn't involved in it, but of Bob Ray's speech here in Montreal. I posted it to my Twitter and Facebook. Manuel from Viva Palestina. I think that's where I got the video from. I think it's him who put the video together. It's a great video. People have a chance. It's quite a good disruption. There's like 6 or 7 different times where they got Ray when he was here in Montreal, and they clearly did a good job. And the video is a very well put together package of this. Um, so the final thing I'll just say is this smear stuff. The level of smears taking place now against me and the campaign, NDP leadership campaign, is just uh, it's actually quite uh, I would say it's surprising, and where it's coming from. The most recent one was the breach. Martin Lukish and Desmond Cole did a segment that was posted yesterday that these people have suddenly become the NDP rules or a description of the NDP rules that the head office of the NDP wants to enforce. Not the description of NDP rules, I have to say, that the CEO told my financial agent back in early September, in writing, I'll say it's in writing, about what the rules of financing. Uh, it's all a big lie, of course, but there's this attack against the campaign and the fundraising of the campaign, and like people like Desmond Cole and Martin Lucas specifically, just like total smear, malicious disinformation that's really kind of remarkable, in my opinion, quite frankly, irrational, dumb. Martin Lucas is a surrogate, official surrogate for Avi Lewis. So now this is coming right from Avi Lewis's campaign, where they're basically trying to, not basically, they are trying aggressively to have us blocked from being able to run in the race, and they are they're lying about the rules, and they're lying about the finances of the campaign to do so. And it's really remarkable too, because the whole fundraising success that we've had, which is a stunning success, we raised like $85,000 in 3 weeks without being able to apply tax credits, without having access to the NDP list. It's just totally, without the corporate media being totally hostile. So we've had a huge success. Then they've now turned this around on us. We were the ones announcing, "Hey, we had this huge success. It's a serious campaign. You got to let us into the race." Da 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 da. And now they're flipping it around and trying to use our success as a sign of how we're involved in financial shenanigans and this and that. It's very embarrassing, honestly. Desmond Cole, when he's tweeting about how much he cares about. Again, this is not even a correct description of NDP rules, but when he's tweeting about like the importance of NDP rules to him, things have really got to a negative place. It's pretty embarrassing. I realized that back in 2017, I wrote about Desmond Cole doing an event with Bernie Farber event with Warren Kinsella. And I pointed out how like a leading anti-racist activist would be doing an event with individuals who were like totally tied into the racist Jewish National Fund. I don't know if that's part of his issue. I think that the whole breach, and obviously Martin has become totally into the Avi campaign. Also, another smear on this front, I mentioned a bit about this last week, but Rachel Gilmore is doubling down. And Rachel Gilmore is all keen on the fact that I'm a Rwanda genocide denier. I don't believe Rachel Gilmore could point to where Rwanda is on the map. And I would call it spade a spade, that this is just total racism. If the only thing you've ever said about me and Africa is to attack me as a Rwanda genocide denier, when I've written maybe the preeminent book about Canada and Africa, and I've written, I don't know, dozens, maybe, yeah, dozens of articles about Canada's role in Africa, and all you've ever talked about is Rwanda genocide. It's pretty bad. And I say that with regards to Desmond Cole and the politics of it. When you get into it, it's like, okay, I get it. He supports Abby Lewis, whatever. But if you sit and think about it, I should at least be like number two, right? I should be the second candidate after Avi. Like you would think that he, doesn't like the racist core group in Haiti. You'd think he's, critical of Canadian foreign policy in Africa and the racist nature of Canadian foreign policy in Africa. The scope to which, and this was a 10-minute segment that they had, Desmond and Martin Lucas yesterday, 10-minute segment. They don't mention the platform. They literally don't mention the platform. We reached out about the platform 10 days ago to them. Nothing about the platform, just slagging about financial rules and this whole moralizing, this and that. And I gotta say, it is remarkable to see the just total punching left, and quite frankly, the hostility to criticism of Canadian foreign policy. Basically, this is the only way in which this could be, you could have the audacity to do this kind of stuff, is if you were like, I just do not care about any of Eve's writing, speaking of criticism, challenging of Canadian foreign policy. That just doesn't. It just is unimportant. That only way this level of smear would be sort of morally acceptable is if you just basically don't care about the issues that I've spent most of my time dealing with. Anyways, it's fascinating to see. We'll see what happens with the getting into the NDP race. We're working on the vetting question, and and yeah, so there'll be more to come on that. Unfortunately, it's 6:29. I don't think I'm gonna have time for any comments or questions, but maybe we'll leave it for next week. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And same place, same time next week. Take care.